Hello and welcome to my guide into a deep dive into the profession tailoring. So what I'm going to do is go through all the things I'm currently selling with my tailoring, some new things I put in there, some old favourites in there, and the things that I'm selling at the moment. And I'm just go through them all one by one, talk about the operations that I'm using, the rationale behind them, my thinking, what's selling well for me, what's not selling well for me, and hopefully that will be useful for other people to try out tailoring themselves. Now, the too long didn't read version of this, if you just want to get straight into tailoring, is go into BfA and start selling the Sinister gear. That's selling really well for me at the moment on my server. Obviously your server may vary depending on your material prices and what they're selling for you, but that's a really good one right now, plus the usual bags, shirts, things like that. Now, by its very nature, this is going to be a long video, so I'm going to put time codes in the description below so you can jump around to various sections if you'd like. So I'm going to have a Pastebin, which I'm going to put in the description below, and you can import that. And I'm going to run through the whole import process through TSM because it's a little bit quirky at the moment. On the version I'm at the moment, 4.613, there's a few little steps you need to do and sometimes the operations don't come through. So I'll run through that first just to explain how to get my Pastebin into a working group for yourselves. Let's bring up TSM now. So I'm going to go into settings and create a new profile. I've already created the base one here. This new one's called Tailoring. It's got nothing in it at the moment. The base group is completely empty. So the first thing I'm going to do, just for the point of clarity, is get rid of all the default operations, just so that when you see the operations, rather than having all the default ones in here, I'm just going to keep it blank. That's really just for clarity. You don't need to do this yourself unless you really want to. So there we go, it's all a bit cleaner now. Just when we're looking at the base group and we look at your group operations, it's just a bit empty so that when we import things we can just see things a bit more clearly. So I'm going to go ahead and import the group. So you could copy this from my Pastebin and you have that big block of text that you literally Control-C copy and then Control-V paste into this section here. So you can import it in. TSM can take a while depending on the speed of your computer because it's quite big, and then leave all these at default, move already grouped items, include operations, and then click import. Now this isn't going to work first time and I'll go through the fix on that when I do it. Then click confirm. So this didn't work first time because TSM told me unable to process import because target group tailoring no longer exists. I think this is a slight bug in the current version of TSM 4.613. This may or may not get fixed in the future, but an easy way to fix that is to literally in your base group you need to make one called what it's expecting. So I'm going to make a new group. I'm going to call it tailoring. In the future you may not need to do that, so I'm just putting it here for completeness in the current version. And then when we go back to the import export, we can import paste string, do the same process, and click import and confirm. So now we have the tailoring group, but it's also tailoring and then tailoring again, which isn't really ideal. So what I'm going to do now is rename this one because you can't have two tailorings in the same subgroup. So I'm going to rename this one we don't need, tailoring no need, and then I'm going to click and drag this one back into the base group. And now we have our main tailoring group and we can get rid of this one we don't need anymore. I'm going to delete that one. So this is my tailoring group all imported with a whole load of different operations and groups all set up. Now sometimes the group operations don't always come through. So I'll have a look at the operations I've currently got. So we've got a few different ones here for auctioning, and then we have a few different ones for crafting, nothing in mailing, and a couple of different ones for shopping. And then we also have a sniper one, snipe average buy, and these two are operations. So going back to our groups, we just need to run through this and make sure that the correct things are assigned to the correct groups. So I'll just do this as a quick run through. That's probably the easiest way, just to get you back to the same place as I intended to be when I exported these. So I'm going to quickly just run through these and check the group operations. So nothing in the base tailoring, it's all clear. In shopping, obviously we want a shopping average buy in this, so I'm going to override that and put in my shopping average buy. BfA mats, cloth and cloth bolts. Now cloth bolts I treat slightly differently and TSM's picked that one up. I use a shop crafting operation in there. I'll go through the operations in more detail as they come up, but for now I'm just going to run through the operations being assigned to the correct places. So bags, we want a basic auctioning group operation to this, and the one I tend to like is this one, average regional DBMarket craft min. So I'm going to add this to the base group of bags, and then we can go through the different crafting operations per thing. So crafting of the deep sea bag, 8 of each, yes. Now the Hexweave bag, we want a crafting operation of 1 of each for that, because you don't tend to make Hexweave bags that often. And now I want to go through these. These are all my shopping for specific items. So I'm going to go through and just override these. It's already worked here. So what you've got here is that's overridden and that's shopping average by. And this should be the same for all 3 of these, which yes, TSM's correctly picked up. Then going into Hyjal bag, we want, yes, the auctioning average 1 is fine. And then crafting 1 of each. Silkweave satchel, that one, just check that. Yes, that's all overridden fine. Silkweave satchel, we want the average 1 is fine, and this one's 8 of each. Then Elekk Plushie, it's got the manual one for that, doesn't have a crafting operation, I'll get into that detail later. Flags are DBMarket craft min and 3 of each, that's correct. And honourable gear crafting doesn't have an auctioning because it's split into 2. And I've reduced this down quite a lot since the Sinister gears come out, so it's only got 1 of each for there. And the selling one has the average, that's correct. We have the mount section, which has crafting 1 of each, and then this should be a shopping override on this one, so we're going to take that off and that off and change this one to a shopping average by. Then pretty clothes should have a general auctioning operation on it, which will be this one, and then probably a general crafting one as well, which will be 1 of each. You don't tend to make more than 1 of these. Now I'll run through these quickly. So that one's 1 of each. This gear is 1 of each. This should be a shopping one, which is swapped. Yep, that's correct. And this one is crafting 1 of each. And then miscellaneous outfits is also 1 of each. And then a shopping correction on that one. And then mooncloth robe is got its own operation and crafting. That one should actually be 2 of each, I believe, just so that if it does sell, I've always got 1 on. And then this one should be a shopping and the other's overridden. Moving down to the shadowy mask, that's got standard, and then 2 of each. Again, if 1 sells, I've got 1 on. And then a shopping version of that is all on there. Shirts and vests, again, yeah, override that and have 1 of each. Rich purple is a special case where I've got 2 of each and its own operation assigned. Sinister gear crafting, I make 8 of those. I'll go into all of these in more detail one by one in separate groups, but for now we'll just go through and carry on. And Sinister gear selling has the average one, that's all fine. So that's the Spellthreads there, average, region and 1 of each. And then shopping operations, this needs to be overridden because we're not selling these, and then we need to change that to shopping average by, and then that should work down for each of these, which will pick up that parent operation. It all works. And then waste of time, we should have a craft min on that, and then a craft 1 of each for that. You could probably actually change that to 2 of each. That would be easier. Okay, so that's the correct operations assigned to the correct groups. So it's a quick step to do. You just need to go through and just make sure everything's got the right things assigned, because TSM doesn't always import them as I intended when I exported it. So now you're matching my tailoring group with your tailoring group. Now obviously feel free to take bits out, don't use bits, it's totally up to you. This is just a basic guide of what I'm currently doing, and you can take it from there and move things around and put things into different groups, however it makes sense to you. So let's go through these in a little bit more detail. What I'll do is I'll start with my basic shopping operations, because those are the core things for my tailoring. Is obviously you need materials, and the easiest and quickest way to get materials is to go and buy them on the auction house. The aim here is to buy when it's cheap, so check different times of day, check on the Undermine journal to see when the things are at their lowest prices, and try to build up a stock of all the different materials that you think you might need. Now, getting all the different bits of cloth is generally advised, I'd say, and then specifically we're looking at the BfA mats and things like that. So in my shopping, we have BfA mats, which we're currently looking for deep sea satin, embroidered deep sea satin, nylon thread and tide spray linen. So the shopping operation assigned to this is my standard shopping average buy. So this is going to be based off my average buy price. So what this operation does is quite simple. We look first for average buy price. If we don't have an average buy price, then we're going to go for DBMarket price instead. So that just catches in case I haven't bought any of these before. So the items in here, in this group, BfA mats. So the big one here, the main one, tide spray linen. Lots and lots of this is needed. Now, I've noticed recently the price has jumped up to about 10 gold, which is quite expensive at the moment. My average purchase price is more like 3 gold 62, and I've currently got 18,000 of it. That's a decent amount for me and my tailoring, because you use that to make the bracers into Expulsom and enchanting things for myself, because I'm also an enchanter. I've also added nylon thread in there because occasionally you can find it on the auction house for less than the vendor buy price, which is about 50 silver. It can fluctuate depending on your reputation. So if you do spot it up cheaper, then that's a way to buy it. And then these two, deep sea satin and embroidered deep sea satin. Now the deep sea satin, again, has gone a little bit higher. I was able to pick up quite a lot of it before 8.1 got released, and therefore it wasn't as much in demand because it wasn't used as much in tailoring. Especially for the embroidered deep sea satin. But now the prices have gone up, so I'm having to fluctuate my price a little bit here on this one. And the same with embroidered deep sea satin. That one's gone up in price as well. Hopefully you'll be able to buy it for a little bit cheaper if you can find a good deal on that. Obviously the embroidered deep sea satin comes from the deep sea satin, including the price of a tide spray. So you basically take the price of deep sea satin and add the price of tide spray. And so when you're doing a shop search for that, let's go over and do that now. So now we've got all our shopping comes through here, and so if we just do a shopping search for our main ones here, let's go for just BfA mats at the moment and run a shopping scan. So here you can see obviously deep sea satin is at 38 gold. I wouldn't buy this embroidered deep sea satin because even though the price of tide spray is 9.85 at the moment, my price is more at 3 gold. So you take this deep sea and add on your price of tide spray, which is, for me it's 3 gold 62, and that will give you your effective price of embroidered deep sea satin. So I wouldn't buy it for any higher than that because you can do that through converting yourself in tailoring. And again, nylon thread here, if it's under 50 silver, then that's worth buying. Otherwise, you'll just leave that as it is. And then the deep sea satin's the other thing to look for. I've got an average purchase price of 38 gold, so I could possibly pick up some more of this just to keep my average down. That's the main thing to do, is buy when it's below your average, even if it's a small amount. As you can see here, there's very little deep sea satin on at the moment. So again, there's probably going to be another market reset of this. Currently at 45 gold. So I'm going to just buy some of this up now whilst we're here, and then this is above my average purchase price. So I'm going to leave those on for now and always keep an eye on it. The main thing with shopping is just to make sure you buy some at various times in the day and try to get some good bargains, and that way you'll increase your profit margins. That's the same process throughout all gold making really. So that's my basic shopping on BfA mats. We also have a cloth group and a cloth bolts group. So looking at those two, on cloth groups, we've got basically all the different types of cloth that you might want to pick up. Ember silk, frost weave, linen, mage weave, nether weave. I've also included fell cloth in there because I like to look out for a cheap price of that because I use that in the mooncloth robe. So currently the mat cost is 73. And then the operation assigned to that one is the same, shopping average buy. Now I've got a slight difference on the cloth bolts. The shopping operation for this is actually shop crafting. What this does is when I look at the operation in detail, it's just got crafting as the price. So it's looking at the crafting price of cloth bolts, and when I do a shopping search for that, TSM reports back as a percentage of the crafting cost. So that way, when I do a shopping search for cloth bolts, if I just do one here, run a shopping scan. Now I would expect these percentages to be higher in red, because normally the crafting of these should be less, but occasionally you might find someone selling the bolts for less than it costs you to craft them, in which case it's worth you buying the bolts rather than the individual cloth. So I just have a quick scan of these, and if any of these are red like this, I won't bother buying the bolts, and I'll go back to the original cloth search, and I'll look here. And again, this will compare against my average buy price first, and then this is a good way to just stock up. You have a look at what's here, and obviously try and ignore all the ones that are particularly high, unless they are low in stock and you might need to buy some up. But something like Frostweave cloth, I currently have 57 in the guild vault, 64 total. Now bearing in mind I also have made some interbolts already to save on storage, so just double check that as well. It might be worth even having the bolts here if you're checking your stock levels. That way I can now look at the Frostweave cloth, say okay, I've got 64 at the moment, I might want to buy some more of that, but I have at the moment bolts of Frostweave are currently, I've got 432, so I have plenty of those. I haven't included the imbued bolts of Frostweave at the moment. For me it's easy enough to craft them because I find that my Frostweave cloth is the cheapest way to do it, and so I work my way up through that. And then the same with all these others, is basically every now and again you do a shopping scan and you try and find cheap versions of these and buy them up if you can. So looking at this, Ember Silk is currently average buy of 4 gold. I've got 92 on me at the moment, and bolts of Ember Silk are here. I currently don't have any on me, so looking at that I'm running low on Ember Silk. So what I would do here is buy up anything really below my average buy price. We have a few here. Now Ember Silk is one of those things you can go and farm. There's quite a nice farm in Bastion of Twilight. I do have a video on that because Ember Silk can be quite useful, but just for the purposes of keeping my averages down, I'm going to buy anything that's below my average. That way my stock levels remain high and my average price remains low. So that's the basic shopping operation. Now I'm going to jump straight ahead into the Sinister gear because that's the one that we're currently doing really well at on my server. Now obviously your server may vary. Now what you'll see here first and foremost is I have two different groups, Sinister gear crafting and Sinister gear selling. That's because when I craft them I don't know what variation I'm going to get, so I have to have a separate operation for that. So when I added the Sinister gear crafting items, I turned on ignore item variations. So when I'm crafting these, it's just going to craft, it doesn't know what it's going to get, so it's just going to craft them. So the group operation for that is crafting 8 of each. And in that operation it's very simple, it's literally craft up to 8 of them, and then all my different crafting operations are all the same, and then the minimum profit is going to be either the minimum between 20% crafting. Now this is profit, the key word here is profit, so it's not 120% crafting, it's just 20% crafting or 400 gold. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, that's just something I found has worked out quite well for me, particularly in things that have a higher profit but their crafting percentage might be slightly different, so the 400 gold takes into account those things. So going back to the group, Sinister gear crafting. So each of these are all the individual different cloak, belt, mittens, pants. The cloaks particularly sell quite well. Now the thing to bear in mind with Sinister gear is it's faction dependent. So most things on the auction house are either, Horde and Alliance either can buy them. But when you make Sinister gear, you only make it for your particular faction, and then can only sell it to your particular faction. It's the same with honourable gear. Now, have a look at your realm and see what population you've got. Are you in a more Alliance or more Horde server? And that will dictate what size of a market you can sell to. You may want to think of creating a Horde character to do the opposite faction so that you've got all bases covered. It's totally up to you. On my selling group, I have all the individual ones without ignore item variations on. So that's Aurora, Fireflash, Harmonious. Now I think I've captured most of these. There may occasionally be one that you create that isn't on this list, in which case you simply add that in, and then don't forget to do a /reload after that, because TSM can get a bit finicky when you've got a ignore item variation group on something. So a /reload will just help out with that. And so all of these have a standard operation for me, my craft minimum one. I like this operation. This is one I tend to use quite a lot for all my crafted stuff. So So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. I've set my duration to 48 hours. I have a post cap of 5, which usually covers most things, and then the stack size of 1. And then looking down here, I've got a bid as 96%. And then this is all my min, max, and normal prices. So these are all compared to each other using crafting and an average of the two. That way it reduces the risk of having any invalid strings. So the basic operation here is it's going to look at the crafting cost, and it's going to look at the DBMarket and the DBRegionMarket average. So the DBMarket is the average for your particular server, the DBRegionMarket average is the average for your whole realm, like EU or NA. And what we're doing here is we're taking an average between the two. The reason why I do this is because sometimes the DB market can fluctuate wildly, and by doing an average between the two, I kind of help offset that fluctuation by also looking at the DB region market, but it's also partially weighted by my own particular market. Otherwise, I just use DB region market average. So it kind of takes into account an equal weighting of DB market and DB region market average. You can change that weighting by adding more versions in and taking an average out of that. But for me, this is the simplest way, and it works for most of my auctions. So the minimum is 40%, the normal is 120%, and the maximum is 300%. Now those are the values that I play with the most, and if I'm going to do a specific operation, I'll be looking at the tooltip and looking at changing these percentages until I get values that I'm quite happy with. Now I've obviously added in crafting here because this is my main crafting operation. So again, my minimum here is 110% crafting. That 10% basically takes into account a little bit the auction house fee. Sometimes people put in divide by 0.95, but for me I just keep it simple and I've got it at 110% crafting. And then my maximum price I've got at 600% crafting and normal at 400% crafting. If I find that this is vastly outweighing this value, then I might change these crafting values. It's something to play around with. The main thing to do here is when you're looking at creating strings like this, is to have a look in your bags. Let me just move this over. So you've got an item in there, and then you look under the TSM auctioning tooltip where you've got min, normal and max prices. So what we're looking at here, I've got blue overalls here. So the min is 225, the normal 676, and the maximum is 1690. So what I do here is look at the crafting cost, which is 49 silver, and you can see here now that the min buyout is 354. So what we're doing here, this uses the same operation, the average DB region market craft min. The reason why we have the maximum between these two as our minimum is that so that we don't end up selling things for vastly underpriced when we could craft it for pennies or other coppers. So in this case my crafting cost is 49 silver, but my minimum price is 225. So rather than using the crafting cost, it's using the 40% DB market and DB region market average as my minimum price. That gives me a comfortable profit, and it means that I'm not going to go really, really low. So a profit there of 353. So the main thing you do when you're looking at adjusting something like this is you would adjust these and have a look at what happens in the tooltip when you adjust them. You do this side by side, and it's really handy just to tweak your figures until you get something that's working for you and your server. So going back to my Sinister Gearcraft, let's just close the bags down. So we have two sections. We have the selling section, which has the auctioning operation assigned to it, and then we have the crafting section, which has crafting 8 of each. So it doesn't matter what sells, it will compare the price against only those particular things when I post them on, and then if I sell one, then if it's less than 8 of them in total out of all the different variations I've made, then that will get added into my crafting queue. So that's Sinister Gear, really good seller for me on my server. Obviously your server may vary. If you're finding it's not profitable for you, the thing to do is try and get your mat cost down. So you're looking at the shopping average buy here of your deep sea satin, your embroidered deep sea satin, and your tie spray linen. Now this moves on to another thing, is Expulsom. So in order to get Expulsom for your Sinister Gear, because if you have a look here, the Sinister Gear requires deep sea satin, embroidered deep sea satin, and Expulsom. Now because I've got the rank 3s, we'll get into the marks of honour in a minute, you also need Expulsom. So the best way for me, I've found, to get Expulsom is to make Tide Spray bracers. And then, because I'm also an enchanter, I disenchant any blues, because they give me a good chance of Umbra Shards and Gloom Dust, and then any greens I go and scrap. And it's the scrapping of those, on average, will give me 1 Expulsom every 6.5 scraps that I do. So that brings me on to setting a price for Expulsom. So if you go into your tailoring window, and so if we look in crafting reports, that's in crafts, make sure you go into materials, there we go, EXP Expulsom. There we go. So we have currently a map price of 251. Now I have a string for this that basically what this does is, I'll put this string in the description so you can copy it. Basically it looks at the price of how much it costs to make a Tide Spray bracer and times that by 6.5. So in this case, a Tide Spray bracer requires 10 of the average buy price of Tide Spray linen plus 4 times the vendor buy price of nylon thread. You could change this to average buy price if you happen to be buying your nylon thread cheaper on the auction house. But for now, because it's quite cheap anyway, this works as a good general ballpark. It's not 100% accurate because it doesn't take into account the materials you get back from scrapping, and it doesn't factor in the fact that I've taken out all the blues as well. But in general, this works quite well for a price for Expulsom. So it's basically the price of 1 Tide Spray bracer times 6.5, because on average, for every 6.5 bracers, you get 1 Expulsom. So that gives me a price for that, for my Sinister gear. That also applies for the Honourable Combatants gear. And then the other thing to bear in mind is, if we just swap over here to tailoring, the other thing to bear in mind is the ranks you have of the Sinister gear. Now I've got rank 3 in all of them. In order to get ranks 2 and ranks 3, you need to get Marks of Honour. Now unfortunately the only way you can really get this effectively is by doing PvP in some shape or form and winning said PvP. So yes, as a gold maker it does mean you will need to do a bit of PvP. I personally found it really enjoyable to do it every now and again. I've done things like arena skirmishes, I've done battlegrounds. The thing to look out for is the odd PvP brawl on the calendar. Like for instance here we've got the PvP Brawl Warsong Scramble at the moment. Make sure you do that because you get a quest for that, and if you win one of those then you get 5 Marks of Honour, so it's really worth doing. And there's another one down here coming up on the 23rd, which is the Cooking Impossible PvP Brawl. So do those quests and you'll get 5 Marks of Honour. A good thing about Marks of Honour is they are account bound, so you can send them to the character that needs the Marks of Honour. So you can do PvP on your favourite character and then send them off to your alts and so on and so forth, until you've got enough for that particular profession. There is another way and you can get a Mark of Honour, and that is through your Legion order hall. If you have a look on the available missions here, sometimes there's one down here, it's called a Good Dust Up, and then if you get the 200% bonus roll for that one, you can get a Mark of Honour as a result from that. So it's worth keeping an eye and looking on your order hall and see if that pops up, and then do that quest. And then what you need to do is decline the quest that comes up from it and delete the quest item, and then it should appear again next week or at some point during the week. So that's Sinister gear, the Expulsom and the Marks of Honour required for that. That's definitely been my favourite seller so far. The Honourable gear came before that. I still have Honourable gear here, and I've done the same. I've got the 2 different groups on this, although the thing I've changed now, as this is in decline, is I've changed the crafting operation to this. Is rather than being 8 of each, I've changed it to 1 of each, just in case I get the occasional sale. And at the moment I still have the selling as a separate one without the ignore item variations checked, because occasionally you do get the purples and those will potentially sell for more. But now that the Sinister gear is out, I've got a feeling that this is going to get less and less effective. So what I might do in the future is just either not craft any at all, or I'll make 1 of each and I'd sell it for the minimum price possible. So I would take out this one and just do the crafting and selling within the same operation. That way TSM will look at it and no matter the variation, it will sell it at the cheapest price. But for now I've just kept it in here as the split 2. So looking at other BFA things, the other things we've got here is flags. I've got the Phalanx Defense and Rallying Swiftness. I believe these are still randomly used as turn-ins. So what I've done here is they're not used for much else other than turn-ins. So I've got crafting 3 of each. as the operation for crafting on these. Now the auction operation here is actually DBMarket craftmin. The reason I've done this is because they're only really sold when there's a turn-in for the Warfront contributions. So what I'm doing here is using DBMarket because it fluctuates quite rapidly, and DBMarket keeps a higher track on that because it's only the last 14 days of the average, with it weighted to the latest days. So I've got the post cap to 5 on here, and then the only real difference here is we're looking at just DBMarket rather than the average between DBMarket and region market. So it's a very similar operation. But that way, this is useful for items that, you know, might be one price one week and then fluctuate to another price, and you want to be able to go with the price on your server more accurately without taking into account what the region is doing. So that's quite a good operation for that. It's quite a simple one. Works quite well though. So those are the main BFA things I'm doing. Obviously, there's also deep sea bags in there as well. Now, depending on the price of your deep sea satin, this may or may not be profitable for you. Before last week, this was profitable for me, but unfortunately, now that my average purchase price of deep sea satin has gone up, it's actually no longer profitable for me to craft this. So even though we have a crafting operation of 8 of each, we just won't be making these until they become profitable again. And the only way they're going to become profitable again is if we reset, or the price of deep sea bags goes up over 1,000, or the price of deep sea satin goes down, and I manage to buy some for cheaper. But at the moment, my deep sea satin is being funneled into the Sinister gear in preference over the deep sea bags. Although they are pretty good sellers, the deep sea bags. They've got a sale rate of 0.63. I have a personal sale rate of 0.9, so they have been selling for me really well. It all depends on profit margins, really. So those are the main BFA things. Now, if you have tailoring skills in all the other expansions, then all my other things here are other ways of making potential gold. So what I've done here is take stuff that either I know has sold through experience, or things that I think might sell for other people and might be worth a go. I've looked through all the TSM average sale rates for the things that I can make. Obviously there are some things I still can't make in some recipes unlearned. So let's start with the bags. So obviously we've covered the deep sea bag. The other things I make is the Hexweave bag. So if you've got your garrison all set up with a tailoring post and you can get the work orders going through on those, then that can become an effective way of just making Hexweave bags. It's the same capacity as a deep sea bag, and so you'll find the prices of Hexweave and deep sea bags are round about the same, but the profit margins on a Hexweave bag is much higher because my crafting cost for a Hexweave bag is only 114 gold at the moment, so that's a 700 profit. The downside of that is because I'm using the tailoring workshop to get the Hexweave, then I'm not using like the primal weaving or anything like that. It's too costly. So the downside is you can't make so many of them. But when I can make them, I mean, I've got an actual sale rate of 1 there, so every time I make one, it does sell. So the things I've done here is, you'll see I've got the Hexweave bag, which has a group operation, craft 1 of each, and average region DBMarket craft min, so that's the standard one for me. But I've also added in these shopping operations. So these are the things that I would need to look out for from a stock level point of view, and make sure that I've got enough of those in order to be able to fulfill the work orders. So for Hexweave work orders, you need the sumptuous fur, and then to make the Hexweave on the daily cooldown, you also need some Gorgon flytrap, and then to make the bags themselves, you need some sorcerous earth. So you need 10 sorcerous earth for every one. So what I've done here in a shopping operation, if you look at these, now I've changed these operations. This says Gorgon flytrap or garrison, sorcerous earth, or sumptuous fur, or farm it. So what that is for me is just a little bit of a reminder. There are other ways of getting these things other than the auction house. Sometimes the simplest and easiest is to buy them on the auction house. So if we did a shopping scan of these now, so this is taking into account my shopping average buy percentage. Now I would look at this Gorgon flytrap. Anything under a gold is usually quite good. You can also set up your herbalism building in your garrison and set it to specifically just do Gorgon flytrap, and so you can collect your Gorgon that way. That's what I did for the first part, and which is why I've got 1,700 of it in my inventory. So I don't need to buy this for a long while yet. Sumptuous fur, there are many ways you can get this. You can go out and farm it or use the fur traps in your garrison, but again, if it's simple and it's easy and the price is right, then go and buy some up. for me, my average purchase price here is 1 gold 63. If I go into my crafting reports, materials, and go to my Hexweave, my Hexweave cloth has a map price of 1 gold, which is actually just a manual price I put in there. Now I could change that to the price of Sumptuous Fur, because the Sumptuous Fur gets turned into Hexweave through the work order, but I've also got my daily cooldown, which again turns Sumptuous Fur into Hexweave cloth. So overall, I've just averaged that out as to about the price that I've been buying Sumptuous Fur for, or if I can't get hold of Sumptuous Fur cheaply enough, I can go out on my Leatherworker, go to Nagrand and go and do the Sumptuous Fur farm there. So there's plenty of different ways of getting it, so I've just set a basic price of 1 gold for me, because in my experience that has been about the average price of my Hexweave cloth through the various methods of getting the Sumptuous Fur and through doing the tailoring cooldown. You could set this to be the value of Sumptuous Fur. You could change this to Sumptuous Fur average buy price, which would be average buy either item number, that's the item number of Sumptuous Fur, 111557, and put that in, close that down. Now when we go and reload this up, now my Hexweave cloth is based off the average buy price of my Sumptuous Fur at the moment. So that could possibly be a more accurate way if you're just buying your Sumptuous Fur. It's a rough ballpark because there are other factors involved in getting the Hexweave cloth. So for me, as I mainly use the Hexweave cloth for making the Hexweave bags, that's for me a rough ballpark figure that works out quite well. So Hexweave bags are a good one. That's a very good seller, but obviously not so many of them. Obviously, if you have a lot of alts, you can set up a whole garrison farm and churn out a lot of Hexweave bags on different characters. So that's something to bear in mind if you have a lot of characters. So the other thing that sells well for me is the Hyjal Expedition bag. So this is currently a good profit of 3,995. Now it costs me a fair amount in volatile life at the moment to cost. That's 40 volatile life and bolts of Ember Silk cloth, which are coming in at 456. But the price is quite good, slightly above region average at the moment. And I sold one last a day ago. These are really good because they're obviously 36 slot bags, so if you've got a herbalist who wants to go out and just keep on collecting lots and lots of herbs, then this is the bag for them. It's not a big quantity seller, but it does sell for a nice profit, so it's worth listing on, obviously depending on your server. My min, normal, max price there is 3, 12 and 18,000, so we're taking into account our crafting cost there, but on average I've sold it for about 6,800. And again, I've attached a shopping operation to look out for any volatile life that is particularly cheap. So that has the shopping average buy on it, and then the Hyjal bag, crafting one of each, and the average standard on that. So moving down my bags, Silkweave satchels is still a good seller because it's quite a bit cheaper than the deep sea bags. And it still has a reasonable capacity. This has got 24 slots versus the deep sea and Hexweave's 32. Now looking at the crafting cost of that is based purely off Shal'dorei silk, and it takes 90 Shal'dorei silk, so only craft this if it's going to be a profit for you and the price is decent. And that all depends on whether you can find any Shal'dorei silk. Obviously the number of Shal'dorei silk has gone down vastly since BfA has gone out, so it all depends on the price of this one here, which I currently have an average purchase price of 2 gold 96. I try and pick up any for less than 3 gold if I can. The region average is 2 gold 87. Now if the price of Shal'dorei silk drops below 2 gold 42, then it may be easier just to make the Silkweave pantaloons and then sell those to a vendor, and you can actually sell those for more than it cost you to make them straight to a vendor, so you don't even have to use the auction house for that one. But that can take a little bit of fiddling, and the profit margins are higher on the Silkweave satchel itself. Usually it's 121 gold there for the crafting cost profit. Obviously it's 90 Shal'dorei silk, so it's a fair amount of silk. If you've got large quantities of it and it's a decent price, and the prices for the satchels on your server is a decent seller, good sale rate 0.99, the region sale rate is 0.49, so it's worth doing if you can find Shal'dorei silk cheap enough. Right, so we've done shopping, we've done bags. Let's move on to this little one, the Elekk Plushie. So this is a pet you can make with tailoring. Now, the trick here is it doesn't have a crafting operation assigned to it because the Elekk Plushie you make through crafting is bind on pickup. So what you then have to do is learn that pet, then you have to cage it, and then that caged version is the one that sells. So it's a little bit tricky. That's why I've got this craft manual on sell. Little reminder here, because basically it's just got a auctioning operation attached to it. And I've actually called this Elekk Plushie manual. So this is a good example of just putting in manual prices for something. So what I've got here is literally set fixed figure of 500 gold, 10,000 gold maximum, and 2,000 gold normal. So that's a really simple example of just doing a fixed price auction, and I don't really want to sell it for less than 500 gold because it uses Hexweave cloth, and I would rather use that Hexweave cloth for something else. It doesn't have the crafting materials here. You have to go into your tailoring, do a search for Elekk. There's the Elekk Plushie. And so the Elekk Plushie here has a crafting cost of 50 Hexweave cloth and 10 Sorcerous Earth. So the crafting cost is 96 gold. So I've set a manual minimum price of 500 gold, because if I'm going to be going through the bother of selling this, I really would rather make a decent profit on it. Otherwise, I would use that Hexweave cloth for making bags instead, which sell really quickly, and I'm better off making gold that way. So the thing to remember with this one is if you are going to sell it, is when it sells, you have to manually go and make a new one and then put it back in. So next up on my list is mounts. Now I don't actually have any experience selling this because I only just recently learned how to make it, but it has a really good profit margin there of 6,800 for the flying carpet. A region sale rate of 0.16, so it's not massive, but for mount collectors it might be worth selling. So I've put this in for completeness. It takes bolts of imbued frostweave, green dye, heavy silken thread, and iceweb spider silk. Now iceweb spider silk is used in a few other things as well, so I've added in its own little shopping operation here to look out for some. I currently have an average buy price of 3 gold 90. I'm sure I could probably get that a bit lower over time, so that's something to look out for. The group operation for this is just the standard one, make one of each and sell it for the average between the two. I'll report back if I get any decent sales of that one. Now moving on to pretty clothes, this is quite a nice section for me because I have a few different bits and pieces here which I've had some decent success with. Other stuff here I haven't tried yet, so I'm just putting in here for completeness because I was looking at the sale rates of what I could make. So these have the average one of each and average DB region market craftsman operation assigned to them. So here is the Admiral's hat. I thought this would be a good seller for BfA because obviously it's following on from the sort of like the sea theme of BfA. I haven't actually sold one for 133 days, so it didn't turn out to be quite the good one to sell. You can get the pattern quite easily down in Booty Bay. It's on a limited run, so you can actually sell the pattern for quite a bit that way. Has a fairly cheap crafting cost and could potentially be a good seller, but I haven't managed to sell one for a while. My average sale price is 244 gold. So depending on your server, you may get better or less results than me. Now, this is another thing that I haven't tried yet, but looking at the sale rates on TSM, this does look to be particularly good. Particularly the vest, I think, looks good on female characters apparently, so I think this one will have a decent sale rate. It's got a region sale rate of 0.09, costs only 24 gold to make, so that would be 146 profit. And for completeness, what I've done is added in the pants, hood and belt. Those sale rates aren't particularly good, 0.04 and 0.08, but just for the sense of completeness, I put those in. The belt itself is even worse, it's 0.01, so I'm not sure how successful this one's going to be. And it requires an iron buckle, which is a blacksmithing item. So what I've done here is obviously the same average and one of each crafting operations for these. And then I've got a shopping average buy on that iron buckle. Obviously if you've got a blacksmither you can make that for quite a bit less. Just sold some sailor's pie. But looking at that, the mat cost of 127, my average buy price is actually 147. I don't know how well these will sell in reality, but it's worth a go. Now one thing that has sold for me quite reasonably is all the black mage weave stuff. This seems to sell relatively well on my server. Not massive profits for everything. That one's only 2 gold, that one's 300, 100, 1 gold for that, 164 for that, and 1,000 for the boots. Now the boots need some thick leather, so I've got thick leather here in my miscellaneous outfit shopping operation, or if you've got a leather worker you can make that out of, I believe it's heavy leather, so bear that in mind. But again, I've got all of them here. You don't necessarily have to have all of these, maybe you want to just do the ones that are decent profit for you. But for me, because the crafting operation will only craft them if they're in a profit, then I'm happy to have them on there, post them on there, and they seem to have a decent enough sale rate for me. Some things better than others. That's 0.07, that one's 0.22, that one's 0.4, 0.57, so those are looking better sale rates there, and 0.08 for the robe, and 1.5 for the shoulders. So a bit hit and miss on those ones, but depending on your server, you may get some luck with that one. I did have the cinder cloth here, but that wasn't selling for me at all, so I haven't included that in this set of operations, but you could do the same for those. Now I've got miscellaneous outfits. Some of these have sold for me quite well. Others I haven't really tried yet. So we've got things like blue overalls, brown linen pants. These just have a reasonable-ish sale rate of 0.05 and 0.07. And then I've got things like the tuxedo pants is quite decent, and the tuxedo jacket. So these are kind of like one-off odd things that people might buy. All depends on your server, and it depends on you finding a buyer for them. So they're kind of like a few random bits and pieces. You could put in the seasonal stuff like the Winter's Veil stuff that's just finished, but obviously now that that's just finished, that's not going to come around till next Christmas. So I would leave that one for now. Now, Mooncloth Robe is one of my favourite sellers. I have a decent profit margin on that of 5,500, and I haven't sold one for 34 days, but I got an average sale price of 7,500, and I've sold 6 since BfA came out. So I'm quite happy with that in terms of something to sell. The thing you do have to look out for this one is it does require Mooncloth, which is from the Fell Cloth, and Golden Pearls, which you can go out and farm, but they are a real pain to farm, so I just end up buying them on the auction house if I can find them cheap enough, because the profit margins on Mooncloth robes is high enough for me to be able to soak up the cost of those Golden Pearls. And then lastly, in my pretty clothes section is the ShowGarrisonLandingPage mask. Now this is actually for the Lucid mount that you can get, so people need this ShowGarrisonLandingPage mask. It's been a generally good seller for me. I've sold it from everything from as little as 2,000 gold for as much as 42,000 gold, so it really depends on what's available on your server and how much that person is willing to pay for them. The last one was sold 13 days ago. Looking at this, the crafting cost is 1,200. The bulk of that comes from Shadow Silk. Now Shadow Silk can be quite expensive. At the moment it's got a region market average of 155, or for my server 290, but I've seen that go as high as 800 gold on Shadow Song here. So depending on your inclination, you can go out and farm this. I do have a guide to farming Shadow Silk. You go down to Lower Blackrock Spire, which is why I've got this in here on Shadow Silk or Farm LBRS, that's what that stands for. So you can go off and farm it yourself. It's a very easy route you can do with a druid or any character really, and pick up some Shadow Silk. You can even sell the Shadow Silk if you have excess. I've currently got 5 spare on me at the moment, but the mask is a generally good seller, so I have a operation for that one. The same average DBMarket craft min, and my crafting operation for this one I've done to 2 of each, just because if one sells then I've always got one on the market. So that's a pretty good one. Now, talking of secret achievements and things, that moves on to the waste of time, which is another thing that requires specific tailoring things. And I did try this when it first came out, and I had very little success with it. So I've included it here because you may find your server is more successful than I've been. I'm going to try it myself again on Shadow Song and see if I get any results. So the things you require for the waste of time is Death Silk shoulders, Frostwoven leggings, Netherweave tunic and Windwool hood. These are all relatively cheap to make. Crafting costs here 18 gold, 3 gold, and it all depends on how many auctions are on at the moment, and there's 4 of those, 6 of the Windwool hood. So, just sold another Sailor's Pipe. They're very easy to make, and a lot of people can make them, so you may find competition quite high on these, and the prices may fluctuate a fair amount. The thing to bear in mind is this Windwool hood. Every time you craft a Windwool hood, there's a random chance that it will create a blue version instead of the green version. Now, the blue versions don't work for this particular achievement, so you need to make sure that you sell just the green ones. So bear that in mind. And then They all take the standard cloth and materials like netherweave and frostweave and such forth, and windwool. So there's nothing special you need to look out for these. You just, if you've got the stock for them, make them. I've got a operation of 2 of each for these, so if one sells, the other one will come on. I haven't tested this recently, so it's going to be a new one for me. It may or may not work out, but I put it here for completeness anyway. Now another thing we have here, one of my favourite sellers, is selling the shirts. Now what I've added in is all the different shirts and vests that I can make as a tailor. There are some of these that I haven't been able to make yet. There are still some in my unlearned tab, so I haven't got the full set of shirts yet. But as a tailor, I really like the idea of being able to make just like a whole rack of shirts and putting those on the auction house. So I've got this simply as make 1 of each and then sell them for the average price. And the profit margins on these are wildly varying. They can be anything from like a few gold up to a few hundred gold. And with the one exception of the rich purple silk shirt, which for me, I've got the recipe for that one. The pattern for that sells quite expensive. I don't know whether you'd actually make your money back if you got it by that method. I've only sold 16 since BfA came out, and an average sale price of 654, so it's not great. But this one is another one that has its own auctioning operation to it. I've set manual prices for this. So again, going in here, we have a look. Minimum price 50 gold, maximum price 6,000 gold, and on average I've found that I've been able to sell this for 3,000 gold. So that's my ballpark. Sometimes people will come in and drive the price down, and I'm happy with that because the crafting cost is so minimal on this. And then once they give up, I then come back and I sell them for 3,000 gold again. And then these other things I've sold with varying degrees of success, sometimes as long as 140 days ago there, and sometimes as little as 4 days ago. So it all depends on what people are looking for. I've got them all in there, tuxedo shirts in there as well. That could go in the pretty close one, but I've got it here in the shirt section. Now there's other shirts you could do, the vendor shirts, you can go to Old Dalaran and do those. I didn't get much success with those because they had a really high posting cost, which is something to bear in mind when you're doing tailoring. If there's something you want to sell, do bear in mind the posting cost for some of these unique old world tailoring items. It can be quite expensive to list, and therefore your profit margins will quickly disappear if you have to keep on relisting them 50 times before you get a sale. So bear that in mind. But these shirts are super cheap, so it's fairly easy just to list those on. Another thing I haven't tested yet is these Spellthreads. I thought they might be quite useful because people would be doing twinks and other things for leveling and might need to sort of upgrade their gear as they went. So I thought this Spellthreads, I don't know exactly how well they're going to work. If we just filter them out here so you don't see the ingredients. They have various sale rates of 0.03, 0.05, 9. So it's nothing massive. The profit margins are fairly reasonable on these. So I think they might be quite good if I can get some sales of them. I don't know yet whether they're going to be good sellers or not, but I put them in there and you can try them out, I can try them out and see how they get on. Now obviously these are all from different expansions at different levels, so they do require a few unique materials. I've divided them into a few shopping operations here. Crystallized Fire and Life. The Primal Mana, I've also included the Mote of Mana there, because for every 10 motes you can get 1 Primal. So look at the price of both of those and compare them. And then volatiles, you need volatile fire and water. If you've got fishing, you can go fish for them. That's why I've said go volatiles or fish for them. They can be quite nice little sellers in themselves, but those are required for these spell threads. So I've just put little operations in there, and they've all got the shopping average by group operation assigned to them. And then the spell threads has the crafting 1 of each and average region and DBMarket of those. So that's my tailoring group with all the things that I've been selling over time and some few suggestions of things that I might be able to sell in the future for some extra gold. Feel free to import it, take out the bits you want, put in some new ones, try some things out. It's totally there for you to look at. What I'd suggest is make up a fresh new profile like I've done here, have a look, bring it all in, and then maybe take some things out that you don't want, add some extra things in, then re-export it and then bring it into your main profiles, or use this as a building block for other professions. It's totally up to you. One of the things I hadn't mentioned though, my shopping, was I did have an operation for sniping. So we went through all of these and we went through the crafting operations. I also had a sniper operation, snipe average buy. Now what this does is it will look for, on the whole, 95% average buy and flag anything up if it sees one for sniping, or it will look at 80% DBMarket if there isn't an average buy price. So what we have here, because our base group doesn't have any sniping operation, the only things we'd be looking for is the tailoring things. So this is quite specific. This is just like a tailoring sniping group. So what you do here is go in and run a sniper scan, and they'll sort of only report back things when they are below your average buy price and they've just been listed, or if you haven't got an average buy price, if they're below 80% DBMarket. And this is just looking for all the things that I've listed as would be useful for a tailor. So say you were doing something else on the computer and you just let this running in the background, it might pop up a few things. Obviously, if you've got more professions, you can add more sniper operations into those materials. For me, it's quite a good specific sniper scan just for the things that I'm interested in buying. And if I can find something for a good deal, then even better, because that maximizes my profits. So that's tailoring for me as of BfA 8.1, what I found successful and what's working for me, and hopefully you'll find that useful and you'll be able to use elements of this too, even if you're just looking at the operations and using those and doing it for your own profession. Feel free to take it apart and use it as much or as little as you like. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's helped out with suggestions and the whole gold making community as a whole, because without everyone sharing their knowledge like this, there would be no gold making community, and it's one of the friendliest I've ever encountered. So I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, feel free to add in the comments below. I'll put as much information as I can in the description below. You can always find me live streaming on Twitch, and I also have a Discord channel, both of which the links will be below. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop by and say hello, and hopefully we can all make some gold. So until next time, happy gold making, and I'll see you soon.